Hello and welcome to this installment of the Indiana Rock Machine. My name is Sly Rose. I am your host tonight, and we are going to be joined live by Gordon Bonham, so stick around. Hello and welcome to the broadcast. I really appreciate my next guest coming on. Say hello to Gordon Bonham.
Hello.
Thank you so much for joining us, Gordon. It's fantastic that you were able to come along here. Just a little bit of history. Gordon and I have known each other for a very long time, and Gordon is one of my favorite people in the world, and that's why I wanted to make sure you got on here right away. And he's put up with my antics. He's pulled me up on stage for these past 35 years or so. So he's always allowed me to join his show one way or the other. So I wanted to make sure that he would join my show for once. So this is my little payback, Gordon. And thank you so much for coming up. I appreciate it.
Great to be here, Sly. Great. Thanks.
Yep. So what we're going to do now is we're going to talk about the history. We're like a Indiana rock and roll history thing here. And we want to kind of get the idea of where you started, where you have gone to, and then where you are right now. We kind of like to try to do it in a chronological order. And I know that you're an Indiana guy from way back. So whereabouts are you from? Where did you grow up in the great state of Indiana?
I was born and grew up in Hammond, Indiana, up in northwest Indiana, the region, as they like to call it.
Yeah, fantastic. And how long did you live there? Pretty much until you went to college? Is that what your time frame was?
Yes, I went off to college and then eventually ended up in Bloomington. But yes, I lived there my whole life.
So
up till then.
So when you were a young child, what was like your first memory of music that you can actually remember?
Well, I did see the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show, and but that was probably 1964. That version. But I remember my mom had a pair of these go-go boots she bought, and they came with a vinyl record inside that was like called the English Beat, and it had knockoffs of, they weren't the real artists, but it had all this rock and roll on there. So that was pretty cool. And of course we all loved the Monkees.
Right. That's awesome.
As much as the Beatles. We like to watch the Monkees. So that was kind of, and my dad played a lot of classical music, which was all over the house all the time, but really rock and roll and that stuff. It was probably the Beatles and just top 40 radio. We had WCFL.
Did that make, oh yeah, Super CFL.
WCFL and WLS were on the radio. That's what we listened to.
Yeah, amen. So did that make you, you weren't old enough really to go out and grab an instrument and start looking for ladies, because I think that's kind of why we all got interested in rock and roll, was because of the screaming girls in the crowd. But when do you remember you're holding on to an instrument? What did you get an interest, like, I want to play something?
Well, I played, a little known fact, I played the trumpet from 4th grade all the way through high school graduation. And I sat first chair, concert band. I read music and did all that stuff, but I didn't get a guitar till I was about 15. But part of my inspiration was when I was in 7th grade, a family of kids moved into my school, and they were Army brats, grew up on the Okinawa. Their dad was in GI, 3 brothers, and they had guitars and they had a band, and it was just the coolest thing. They were doing Jeremiah Was a Bullfrog,
nice,
Creedence Clearwater Revival, Beatles songs. And it's like, when I saw that, it's like, I had to have it. So that was 7th grade, but I never got a guitar till sophomore year in high school. So it took me a while of wanting.
Yeah. Well, do you remember your first trip into the music store, or where did you get that guitar? How did you get it?
Harold's Pawn Shop. I did some painting around the house. I mean, exterior painting for my dad, and my payment was he took me down to the pawn shop and I bought a Harmony acoustic guitar. That was
with
probably
the frets, with the strings about an inch and a half above the frets.
It was awful, but I kind of wish I had it now.
Of course. Yeah, that's
and
great.
What was my first song I learned? American Pie by Don McLean.
Oh, a nice short one there. Nice,
Came out in
nice 2 minute three
came out in
chord.
1971, and I just sat on the front porch and strummed and strummed and strummed. But yeah, that was how it all began.
That's fantastic. So, do you remember when Gordon went electric?
Oh, geez. Well, a buddy of mine in high school who taught me a lot, a guy named Dave Parker, always had electric guitars, and he played the electric guitar in our jazz band in high school, which I was in. So I'd go over to his house and crank up till the parents yelled at us. But I didn't get an electric guitar until college.
Oh,
Took me
okay.
I was a folky guy.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I think we have a picture kind of that. If you don't mind, I'd like to show a picture, bring it on here of you back in the day.
Oh yes, this is in the little giant room, little like coffee house setting we had in the underneath the cafeteria. It's Paul Crash on lead vocals and Frank Fish on bass. We had a little group called Bonham, Fish, and Crash.
Nice. And what is that thing in the lower right corner? It almost looks like a yard that you would get at the Irish Lion. Or is that just a drink over there? I can't really tell.
I think it's a drink on some kind of stool or something.
Okay.
Maybe.
I didn't know if you were
Notice
doing.
me barefooted like a hippie. That's
Ah, there
great.
you go. Doing yards. That was a yard picture back there in the background. So you guys would jam in the Parker basement, and that's kind of how things went there for a while. And um do you remember, did this morph into like a band, or did you did you put an ad in the paper? Did you answer an ad? How did that whole thing go to get to your first kind of real band?
Well, the first real band was with Dave Parker and his two brothers, Tim and Tom, who were, of course, the Parker brothers at first.
Hmm.
But then they added me, and we called our band Kid Stuff, kind of a homage to The Kids Are All Right by the Who, which we all went and saw a dozen times at the midnight movie. And so throughout college, we jammed every chance we could get
Do you
and played in
remember
the
where
basement.
Yeah, do you remember where the first paying gig was? Was it with those guys?
My first paying gig was on the east side of Hammond, a little area of town called Roxanne. I forget the name of the bar, but it was a biker bar, a dump, but it was cool. And
In the
we did a lot of
in the shadow of the
folk rocky
Falstaff
stuff.
stacks there on the
Yeah.
Skyway?
Oh, yeah. It was like a Springsteen song. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm sorry, I walked all over you there. You were talking about that first gig. It was in the shadows of the Falstaff stacks, but continue on. I'm sorry.
It was just a bar gig, and we did lots of Rolling Stones and Tom Petty and Neil Young songs. And I used to tell all the bands I was in, if you guys let me play one blues song, I'll be in the band. So I would always do a Clapton song or Muddy Waters or something.
So what year would that have been?
Gosh, probably 1978, 77,
Okay.
78.
And did you say, "Wow, this is fantastic"? Was there I always like to ask the first gig because there's just so many nerves, and it's like you get all psyched up, and sometimes there's one person there or two people there. I've heard some stories about people playing to strippers and in a bar and stuff like that. Do you remember anything about that gig?
No, actually, if you want the one that touched all the nerves, my very first time playing guitar in front of people, I think, was at a talent show in high school. And it was so terrifying and exciting, but I couldn't get enough of it. I think that was what planted the seed. I mean, it was awfully scary, but I wanted to go back and do it again. It was great.
Do you remember what the song was that you did?
I did a duet with a friend, and we did Teach Your Children by Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. And I forget what the other song was. Maybe Old Man by Neil Young or something like that.
Gotcha. So you mentioned Dave Parker. Do you still stay in touch with him? Is he around, or what is he up to?
He still lives up in the region and has a group that Dave and Dave. It's him and another singer named Dave. And but we keep in contact. And lately, I've been sending him tracks I've been recording at home, and I got kind of Dropbox all my files to him, and he's been mixing my newest record, which someday will come out.
Nice. Now,
My COVID songs.
Right. Now, didn't he have a studio up by your old house or something too? Didn't he do something there?
In my old house.
In your old house, right.
He rented the house I grew up in from my parents for several years. And so the first Cooler Kings record was done in that house. And I had done a bunch of stuff up there too, besides that. So now he doesn't have a studio, but he still does projects in his basement.
Nice. So when you were playing there, how many shows did you guys do in this version of this first band? Do you remember like how far you went? Did you ever get to like Gary, or did you ever get to Crown Point or any places like that?
Yeah, we did play in Crown Point actually. I remember once, and we did gigs, and we were by this time we were all both in college. So Dave was at Rose Holman, and I was at Wabash. So we played gigs at the schools. But whatever we could get parties and things like that.
So you graduate from high school and you go to Wabash. What drew you to Wabash? Why did you want to go to Wabash?
Believe it or not, I was a pre-med student. So I had it all in my head I was going to be a doctor, and then took a left turn junior year.
Like okay, I was going to say the first day of school, or did you wait till the junior year or something like that? So at junior year, usually when you're in college, you get to a point where you decide to change majors or something like that. It's usually a class that you don't want to take. So personally, for me, I was going to double major in radio and TV and then also do psychology. But there was the 1-300 level psychology class that I was not going to take because I can't add 2 and 2, and that was stats. And I knew that I would never get my double major. So I knew at that point that I had to change. Did you have a moment like that in school where you go, I can't do this part?
Actually, you're very correct. Organic chemistry was one of my was the bane that got me. I thought, if I ever have to take another class like that again, I don't ever want to be in school again. So that was kind of one of the yes, that was definitely a nail in the coffin there.
So that led you to where?
Well, then I switched majors from biology to a philosophy major because I thought, if I'm going to be in college, I wanted to just study things that I was interested in. Mm-hmm. So I ended up with a double major, but I really veered off to the left, I guess.
Yeah, well, that's all right. You pick a direction and you go that way, right?
Yeah, I was kind of just into all this kind of brainy stuff, thinking a lot about stuff, which I don't know. Being a musician, and a songwriter, that's kind of where your head is.
Exactly. So you were in Wabash. Did you play there? Did you have any coffee house gigs, or what kind of thing was going on there?
The first picture you showed was my college band. That little trio.
Okay. Gotcha.
And we played lots of parties, fraternity parties, no sorority parties at Wabash. And so, yeah, that went on for several years. And we've done reunions over the years, which has been fun.
Nice. And did you guys tour out of the Wabash area, out of the college area there? Did you go to
No,
Did you go anyplace else?
We just played on campus.
So when you're doing these gigs, like you're like in a real band at Wabash, and yeah, as you can tell, I'm kind of a gear guy. You've known me for a lot of time. I love to collect it. I'm terrible at playing it, but do you?
I see it on the wall there behind you.
When you were in this band, because you and I talk a lot about gear because we love that stuff. Do you remember what you were playing? Were you guys electric? Were you guys were you still playing acoustics at that point, or had you gone electric?
This was all acoustic.
Okay.
We were trying to be, this is late 70s, and we wanted to be Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, so we were a few years behind them, but those were our role models.
Nice. So do you remember buying your first electric guitar?
Yes. My first electric guitar I bought at Broadway Music in Gary. It was a 1976 Stratocaster, Fender Stratocaster.
Which, so it was a 76. not inside.
hmm
Okay. So perfect. Okay. So,
This was probably 1977. I think it had been repossessed.
oh, okay. Linda Blair had given that up in a settlement of some sort after her possession. But anyway, do you happen to remember what amplifier you used, or did you buy it at the same time? Obviously, did you buy one or did you borrow one?
I had a Fender Twin Reverb.
Is one arm
Which-
shorter than the other?
Yes, I was probably scoliosis because of that one. Although, I still use the same gear, Fenders, amps, and Fender guitars. So I knew what I liked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And one of my favorite guitars of yours back in the old days was the Tokai. You had a great Tokai Strat copy that was just a fantastic guitar too.
Refrigerator white.
Yes.
Yeah, it was a good guitar.
Those are kind of great. Anything that you, before we kind of get into the band thing, because we do like to talk gear a little bit, do you have any guitar that you had at one point that you you traded or you sold or you gave it as a gift, or anything that you got rid of but you wish right now that you still had? You kick yourself?
I kind of wish I had my original Harmony, and I had a early '60s Martin guitar. I had to let go. I'd kind of like to have that, but no, everything. I kind of have a rule: if I get a new one, I have to sell one. So it's always kind of a painful. Something's got to go to make room.
Right. Oh, that's a tough. Wow, that's Sophie's Choice or something like that, wasn't that?
Oh, exactly.
Like, oh no, what am I going to do? We're not supposed to sell anything. We're just supposed to buy. So, talking about the Wabash years, you left obviously Wabash and you moved a little bit further south. When did that happen, and why did it happen, and what was the situation there?
After school, I went back home, but then had a girlfriend in Bloomington at IU and spent a lot of time down in Bloomington, and eventually moved there once in 81 for a while, 1981. Couldn't get a job or a band or anything. Went back home, worked for a few years, but then in 1984, I kind of had a soft spot for Bloomington. I went to Bloomington for the weekend and stayed. Called my job boss on Monday and said, "I'm not coming back." He kind of freaked out, and I had come for the weekend. I met Jim Bracken, and we started a band on Sunday, and the rest was history.
Where were you working at the time that you had to call and say, "I'm not coming back"?
For a big landscaping company on the south side of Chicago.
Gotcha. So you moved to Bloomington, just kind of you got the soft spot there. You find a place to live, and how do you run into Bracken? How does that happen?
Well, through our good friend PK Lavengood. I went into Tom Pickett's guitar gallery and I said, I'd known PK since the 70s. I said, "PK, what's going on in town?" And he said, "If I wasn't in Rods and Cones, I would be playing with this guy. Here's his number." So I called him and went over there, and we started a band that day.
Wow.
It was kind of magical.
And
Which
that
became the Ragin Texans. And
what about the Little Harold?
yeah, the first band was Little Harold.
Okay.
Jim knew a drummer and a bass player, and by a couple of days later we had a rehearsal, and then 2 weeks later we opened up for John Lee Hooker at Jake's.
Wow.
So our very first gig was opening for Hooker, which was pretty amazing.
Now I remember I remember when I had met you was shortly as probably right around this time where you're meeting Jim, because I used to work at Jake's, and that's probably or the Ice House, or I was bartending at the Peanut Barrel across the street. But I think I remember you as the first time I saw you. I think that's the guy that was in Blue Hue, because blue hue and the color tones, unbeknownst to me, I moved into a house at 19th and Lincoln up on the north side of not too far from the football stadium in Bloomington. And somebody came knocking on my door like at 3 a.m, just pounding on the door saying, "You have to let us in. Come on, let us in." And I go, "Why are you here at 3 o'clock in the morning?" I had just gotten home from the bar myself because I was working. And this is the Blue Hue house, right? This is where the Blue Hue guys live. And I go, that was last year or the year before. But
Oh
what
gosh.
about your time at the Blue Hue? Do you remember anything they were really fun. That was a fun band.
Yeah, the first band was Little Harold and the Homewreckers, which started in May, and then by the end of the school year, Blue Hue kind of broke up, and then they reformed in the middle of the summer, and they offered me the job as guitar player, and the band for a short period at that time was called Blue Hue and the Extremes. They kind of wanted a new name and everything.
Uh-huh.
So I quit Little Harold because, the Little Harold was just playing once a month just for fun. And these guys got a bus and a PA and a manager, and they're going to go on the road, do the whole deal. And up to that point, they had been doing Mellencamp and Springsteen and just roots rock stuff that I really dug. So I joined the band. But by the time fall got there, the band was starting to do 90s rock, or late 80s synth rock, and I hated the music, to be honest.
Right.
The Cars and Wang Chung and the just pop MTV music.
Right.
And so I gave notice, but I kind of limped along. I lasted till I quit around Thanksgiving, but I played New Year's Eve with them because they needed a guitar player. And then, so I was with them for a good solid 6 months, and it was a lot of fun. Big band, nine guys and 2 crew. We drove around an old school bus, and it was just crazy party all the time,
Did you do any tours like down south to schools? Like, I always hear.
No, we went to Michigan, but I think they maybe did that kind of down south stuff later on.
So when you were on the bus, where were you guys going to? Do you remember some of the places you played?
Michigan and the Razzmatazz up in Indianapolis, and we probably played Muncie a couple times. I kind of forget. It was a blur.
Yeah. I was told I had a great time in the 80s, but I'm not sure, but I've been told that. So, I know we had some really good times, but, Rex Miller was also in Little Harold with you right around the same time. Is that true?
Oh yeah. He was the drummer. We knew was kind of waited on him and started the band. He was gone for a week or so, and when he showed up, we took off. So yeah.
So you mentioned John Lee Hooker, warming up for him down at Jake's, or was it Oscar's then? It was probably Jake's at that point.
It was Jake's, yeah.
It was Jake's, yeah. Besides playing that show with John Lee Hooker, any other memories of great shows with Little Harold or Blue Hue from that period, like something that just stands out, kind of on the Hooker type thing?
Well, Blue Hue never did warm-ups for people like that, but we did have, I think we held the record at Jake's and the Bluebird for biggest crowds, biggest attendance. I mean, that place, the Bluebird holds 350 people or so, and we'd get 900, 1,000 people in there. It was just out of control.
Pandemonium.
And Little Harold, besides opening for Hooker, we opened for Webb Wilder. I remember that was a great show. And
I think we opened about a Halloween show or something.
Oh, there was a Halloween show that ended up on video, which is kind of crazy. But I think we also opened for Richard Thompson once at Jake's, and David Lindley. We did a lot of pretty cool things.
Nice. So you were doing like the Patio, Second Story, the Bluebird, kind of like that type of show in those kind of areas then?
I think I still have I should have sent you this picture. Our first time at the Patio, we split the night with the Starlets.
The Fabulous Starlets. How about that?
Yeah, and I think the byline was the Starlets, are bring you whatever, and then the Homewreckers are going to tear it all down.
Well, I've got a couple of pictures here from that era, and these look like the Eberly brothers. Is that what's going on in this picture?
That's Jim Brackett and myself in front of Eberly Hardware right there on Kirkwood and Bloomington. I don't think we even stage that. I think we may have noticed that after the fact that it said Eberly.
Yeah. Kismet, just a perfect arrangement there. So,
Yeah.
is this pretty much like when you guys had met, like the first,
It was probably that first spring, summer. Yeah.
Mhm.
Jim was a late start freshman or sophomore in college. I don't think he started college till he was 26.
Wow.
And I was getting him in trouble. He was trying to be a good student, and I kept dragging him out to play music.
So here it looks like you guys are in action here. Is this any relation to what Mark Cuban might have been putting on back in those days? We all know what Mark Cuban was doing with the Pick-a-Chick farms back then. That's where he
Right.
got his
This is
start.
ass
Is this the
kickers.
Pick-a-Chick?
This is out at Pick-a-Chick Farm, and the big party they'd have every spring. It was kind of a alternative to Greek weekend stuff for the race. So it's more like a big towny fest party.
And if I remember correctly, Mark Cuban made his money by staging these and then also renting buses that would pick up students at the dorms and take them out and bring them back. Is that what do you remember of those parties? Because that's what comes to my mind.
I don't remember that, but
I think so. I think I might actually be correct for once. But I do believe that's where he got his seed money for that bar that he opened in Bloomington down on Kirkwood. The name of it escapes me right now. But so these are who are the people in this picture, and what group is this?
This is Little Harold.
Okay.
So it's Jim and myself, Mark Savinsky back on bass, and the drummer, Ed, what is his name? I'm having trouble finding it.
Yeah, well, it's Ed. We'll know him as
There's
Ed.
that is the white Tokai Strat right there.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, that's a good one. So we're now moving into the kind of like the where you guys really hit your stride with the guys in the band, and that's this group right here. I've heard some great stories about these guys. How did you meet these fellows, and how did you guys all get together?
Well, it all began. I had a Christmas party at the Gold Rush. They hired me to play just a little party for them, and I asked Jim, that's Jim Bracken right in the center, to come help out because I wanted to rock out. And I think at the time my little trio was called the Genuine Lizard Band.
Mm-hmm.
I had a watch that had a Genuine Lizard Band, and I thought it's a great name for a band. So, and Jim said, well, we need to be something else. So we pretty much actually had kind of an off-color version of the Ragin Texans, which I won't say. But
I think I know where you're going with that.
And that in the picture, there's me, Jim, Brian Lappin kneeling down. He was the bass player, and Craig Brenner back there on the keyboards.
There's a guy wearing a mask incorrectly on here.
And then the guy with the mask is Kenny Aronoff. So our first gig was at the Brown County Inn. And when we got there, the booking guy had put the Raging Texans on the marquee, which stuck. It wasn't really our official name, but that's where it came from. So it's kind of funny. We were named by somebody else.
Yeah. How about that? Hey, whatever works, right?
Tom and Kathy Canada bought for a short time what's now the Crazy Horse next to the Irish Lion.
Mm-hmm.
They called it Tomcats for a few years. And we started playing there at least one weekend a month. And we asked Kenny if he wanted to join us. It's when Mellencamp was recording Lonesome Jubilee. And he's like, sure. And so we would play Thursday, Friday, Saturday, 1 or 2 weekends a month. And we were kind of house band there. And we couldn't believe it. We had this great guy playing drums with us. And the band really kind of took off with that.
And how did you meet him? Refresh my memory.
I think Craig Brenner just called him and asked him to come play. And he said, sure. Yeah.
And that's what, probably around 1986, 85, 86, something like that when you guys
did
this?
Probably 86, yes.
So you were there from, let's set the kind of like the dates here. So 86 until when? When did the Ragin Texans kind of splinter a little bit?
Well, in December of 88, I moved to Austin, Texas, to play with Gary Primich. And the Texans kept on, and I eventually came back 2 years later and rejoined the band. But that was kind of my little hiatus from that.
Can you explain to some of the people here? We're kind of centric on Indiana rock and roll history, but tell us something about Gary Primich. He was a really, really interesting guy.
He was probably one of the top 5 harmonica players in the whole world, I think. Blues, anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And he grew up in Gary, Indiana, actually, and went to IU. I met him in Bloomington. But then he moved to Austin in probably 85. Oh, incidentally, that very first Little Harold gig, opening up for John Lee Hooker, we had Gary sit in with us.
Oh.
So that was kind of pointing toward the future of what might happen, because we met, he knew me, and he offered me the job, and so I moved down to. He was had established himself in Austin, and he had a band called the Manish Boys. They wanted a new guitar player, so they hired me, and I moved down there.
So you guys toured a lot. You played a lot of different places with him, right?
We went that's all we did was tour. I kind of got that out of my system. Yeah, we used to joke. People would say, "What's it like living in Austin?" And I would say, "I don't know. It's where we keep our stuff," because we were on the road all the time.
And you traveled internationally, right?
We went to Europe for a month. Yeah, I went to Sweden and Norway and Finland. That was great.
So Gary said, "Come on down here," and you decided to go, and that was quite a trip. Do you remember the day you left? I mean, does anything come to mind, that road trip down there? Anything that pop into your head from that day, going, "Okay, I'm going to go do this," and okay, I guess I have to leave now?
It was kind of bittersweet. I mean, I loved Bloomington, and it was kind of hard to leave. But once again, it looked like a great opportunity, and there's a band with a record deal, and they traveled, and I mean, went all over the Southwest and the West Coast and the Midwest and New Orleans. We played everywhere. So I thought, you know what, I want to be in a band from Austin.
Mm-hmm.
So I went, and actually I moved with a guy who was very much a part of the music scene in Bloomington, a guy named Tom Donahue, who had Blue Rock Records.
Yep.
And then it became TDs, CDs, and LPs. And so I was roommates with Tom Donahue the years I was down there.
Fantastic. Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people.
There was a whole little
his name,
group of Bloomington folks who had migrated to Austin. So it was kind of easy to get down there. There were a lot of friendly faces.
Yeah, and especially have a place like that where you can say, "Hey, I've got a roommate here." Someplace to land is always a good thing when you're heading that far away from home, because that's a pretty good haul.
Yeah, and my very first gig in town was at Antone's, probably the mecca of the blues in Texas. So it was kind of exciting to get to play there.
Now, I came down there for a while to visit you one time, and you guys were playing outdoors. Was that South by Southwest? Was that one of those days?
It might have been. I did play the very second South by Southwest, which was in 1989.
Yeah, that sounds about right. It was on a great big stage with the river behind you, right? Is that kind of like the area it is, and the city behind?
Oh, no, you know what? That was a City Parks event we did. I think we opened up for Jerry Lee Lewis that day, the one in front of the river.
Yeah. That was great. That was a great day too. Little overcast, if I remember right, because I tried to take some pictures and they were all washed out. But that was a great memory. But so now steering, I like to steer things back to the Indiana thing. So before Gary got you to move down there, I mean, some of the shows, the Ragin Texans shows were just epic at the Bluebird. I mean, that's where I remember you guys playing, and I worked down the street at Jake's. So we always got a reciprocity thing where people that worked at the Bluebird could get in free at Jake's to watch the bands there. And if you worked at there, you could go down to the Bluebird and watch the bands for free. And I just remember I would play music before the band went on, then between breaks. So that would allow me to run down the street, because there's only like a half a block, and I could run down the streets and see you guys playing. And one night you said, "Hey, Sly, just come down here." And we have this light thing that no one ever moves the lights on. We have these lights, but no one ever controls them. How about you just run the lights one night for us? So I would come down after I got started. I'd run the light board and I go, okay, I'd wave and you guys, like, I would set the lights on so the whole stage was lit, and I'd have to go back because Henry Lee Summer or somebody else was down the street playing, at Jake's, and I had to go do that. But you guys,
Right.
just some fantastic nights there at the Bluebird, because it's Bloomington centric at that point. But tell us the story behind this picture here, because this is the same group. But did you do like a trade out deal or something to get a picture of this? Is high quality stuff.
Yeah, it's actually on the little limbo photography stage at the Bloomington newspaper. What used to be the Herald Times. I'm not sure what they call it now. Maybe just the Herald or something. But yeah, they kept wanting a picture of us in the paper for the entertainment section, and we didn't have a band photo. We just didn't really care. They said, come on down, we'll take your picture. So we got a bunch of nice glossy 8x10s. I'm not sure this is one of the nicest ones. We were just goofballs. But yeah, it was a lot of fun.
The greatest band that hated to practice. That's what you guys were.
We used to joke, once the band takes a photo, you have to break up. So we would never get our picture.
That's a great story. That's absolutely right. So here's a couple of pictures I actually took back in the day, way back in the day. This is obviously the Bluebird after they put the reinforcements on the ceiling to keep it from not falling in. But we can see that sometimes these would devolve into people coming up and singing songs that weren't in the band. This is where I made a few appearances on these kind of shows. And we can see that there's some other assorted people here too. But this would probably lead me to believe this is probably the third set of a show in Bloomington at the Bluebird.
Yeah, it looks like things are getting a little loose. Yeah. Jim had this habit of the first time he did it, you were talking about those reinforcements they put in. I smacked my head on the reinforcements. He had this trick where he would sneak up behind me, stick his head between my legs, and just stand straight up. And all of a sudden I'd be on his shoulders.
Yeah, until you hit that post that's above you, right? It's like, oh, geez.
I didn't even know it was coming. But so yeah, that happened a few times. And just goofy, crazy stuff we did on stage. Yeah, we used to do a thing where it's kind of blues tradition to play the guitar behind your head. Well, I used to play my guitar behind my head. Then Jim would walk up and play my guitar behind my head, which was kind of our own little take on that.
Mm-hmm.
And then sometimes I would reach down and play his guitar while it was hanging behind me. So it was just goofy stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's stuff like this that really endears a band to people out in the out in the crowd, because you can be all slick and everything and do like a show that is to the set list. Don't deviate from the set list. We're here for a certain amount of time, then we're going to be off, and very strict and very stringent. But I think what endeared me, and I know a lot of my friends who love the Ragin Texans, that's what endeared your band to us, was just that you were just like they're having a great time, and that really shows, and it really brings the audience in.
I agree. I used to say that I think people liked us so much because they just loved to come out and watch us have fun.
Mm-hmm.
We loved what we were doing. We loved the music we were playing. Other people said, how do you guys do it? And we just said, we play music that we really like, and people can tell that. So I think a lot of times folks don't know what they like, but if someone's having that much fun, it's just infectious,
Now, because you did some of this stuff and you just weren't standing there like robots, did you ever have like a scary moment, like besides hitting your head on the roof of the Bluebird? Did anybody ever fall off the stage, or did anybody do something really stupid, or did somebody throw stuff at you like in the Blues Brothers?
We always did things stupid, but I don't think anyone ever got hurt or fell down. No, we were lucky, I guess. It was just a lot of shenanigans.
Yeah. Because you hear every once in a while, like a couple people I've talked to, is like, I asked them, what was your scariest moment? It's like, oh yeah, the time when the stage fell down and we disappeared, or stuff like that. So I kind of like to get a,
we did have a food fight in the dressing room one time on break, and had to go back on stage with chocolate cake everywhere. That was kind of fun.
Yeah, and that dressing room was so huge at the Bluebird, right? You had so much.
Yeah, there'd be 20 people in there and you couldn't even move.
So you guys played at the Bluebird a lot. What about in Indianapolis? Where did you guys play in Indy?
We played at the Vogue quite often and the patio now and then. And we did some other, we used to play at this private club called the Sanger Corps. I think we did their Halloween party for about 20 years. Just went on and on and on. Even after the band was, we were all older, we would get back together just for that gig. But the Vogue a lot.
Mm-hmm.
One time we were playing the Vogue. It was the Saturday of the state fair in the summer. And I think Mellencamp had played at the state fair and everybody came over to the Vogue afterwards. And that was quite an exciting night. Henry Lee got up with us. We had a horn section and it was, I think Larry Crane probably got up with us and Mike Wanchek. It was cool.
Those are always very, very fun nights for everybody involved. And, you know, because we were both in Bloomington at around this same point, there was a time in Bloomington. I've talked to other people we've had on here, Chris Pyle and some other folks about that summer, the couple of summers when people were coming to Indiana to record at the Belmont Mall, like with Mellencamp and his group. So some of the names that came through that group of years, that couple of years, 2 or 3 years, what people do you remember that came through town that you might have played with or just watched that you said, wow, this is really cool?
Well, you know, since we had Kenny in the band, practically anyone famous who came to town would come out to see us because they all knew Kenny. So we had, REO Speedwagon came out one night and the Georgia Satellites. REM sat in with us. When Ray Charles' plane crashed on landing in Bloomington one time, the whole band came and sat in with us, Ray Charles's band. Who else?
This guy in this picture.
And there's John Prine. Yes, that was the one where he and Lou Reed and a bunch of folks were in town rehearsing for Farm Aid that weekend. And they called me that morning and said, John would like to come and practice some of the songs they're doing at Farm Aid on your break. And I said, sure, come on out. So sure enough, there was Lou Reed and John Mellencamp and the whole band. And then John Prine, they did their set, which is kind of famous. I think you can find it now on YouTube.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then they all took off and John Prine shows up and we got him and he played an hour and a half with us that night. It was great.
Wow.
It was really something.
Wow. That's incredible. I used to know some of the, since I worked at Jake's, some of the people from the Mellencamp office would come down there and I got to know them pretty well. And then we would say, you know, what's going on in the office today? And well, so-and-so's in town to record this and so-and-so's in town to record that. And just a lot of people going through. And speaking of Mellencamp's band, here's somebody from that band right here.
Yeah, there's Toby Myers. We got to be pretty good friends. Yeah. Actually, the first time I played with Bo Diddley, I knew that Mellencamp's band had backed him up before. And Toby had played with Bo, and I thought, you know, I need one guy on stage who's done it before. So I asked Toby, and we had a great show at the Vogue. Yeah.
So it's kind of fun feeling that energy from another group, and then having that group, you know, like REM or somebody like that sold millions and millions of records. You know, it's like, wow, this is one of those moments that you really remember. So having John Prine come up there and play with you guys for that long, that just had to be fantastic. And you know, after we move from the Ragin Texans and move a little bit further closer in the timeline to now, I know you guys still get together quite a bit as the Texans up to this point. I mean, you're playing everywhere. I mean, I saw you at a friend of mine's party, whatever it was,
Yeah.
2 years ago. Yeah. So,
Well,
who said you say we're just going to get together? I know it kind of revolves around a weekend in July, like the Taste of Bloomington, right? You guys try to get together that week?
yeah, we did that off and on or I mean, every summer for about 10 years, I think. We would just, they just would hire us, and that would maybe be the only gig we did all year together. So it was always fun, but a bit of a struggle because you start forgetting a lot of the stuff.
Right. Yeah,
Well, we
exactly.
played a year ago.
Yeah, so a
And
Taste of Bloomington, we've gone to see you multiple times at the Taste of Bloomington, and that so it's I think that's a testament to you guys that you're able to, first of all, that people are still interested. People still want to see you guys play together because it's just such a joy to watch you guys play and just go, okay, let's do this song. Then boom, just go into it. It's really a rare talent to be able to do that.
yeah, it's pretty cool. It happens to me quite often. I'll run into somebody and they say, "You were in that band in Bloomington in the middle '80s." I was in college. It was the greatest thing ever. I mean, it's people have a lot of good memories of it. And
Yeah.
again, I think it's because we loved what we were doing so much. It's funny. We used to get up on stage and say, "Good evening. We're going to play a bunch of stuff that we like. If you don't like it, you should leave." And people would laugh. They love that.
Yeah, the flowing beer doesn't hurt too much either. So we're kind of wrapping up the Ragin Texans, the band that won't go away, because we're kind of trying to move into the 90s, but the Ragin Texans kind of go through the 90s, they kind of leap into the double aughts, they kind of leap into the teens, and they just keep kind of going and going. But after you left and went to Austin and then came back, what happened when you came back? Like the solo stuff started happening, or what happened when you moved back from Austin?
Well, there was the occasional Raging Texans gig then, which is just every once in a while. But I hooked up with two brothers, Tim and Matt Brookshire, and we started a little trio. And it was kind of called Gordon Bonham and the Kings of Rhythm. They had a band called the Kings of Rhythm that they had been in as teenagers, and so it's like, that's your band name, that's you guys with me. And for a couple of years, and it's where I really worked on my singing and being a front man, and because it was trio, it was a lot of work. I had to play all the guitar solos, sing all the songs, but it was really good work for me. So, and we started playing at the Slippery Noodle in Indianapolis and branching out CT Peppers in Indianapolis. So I was not only playing Bloomington, we were going all over the place, playing in Ohio and Lafayette and Louisville. So we and up into Michigan, we would go up to Michigan and play. So it's kind of really my first band where I was really the band leader.
And what did the set list look like? I mean, you kind of went from Americana, kind of, with the Texans and that sort of stuff. It wasn't really called Americana back then. The Blasters kind of called it American music. But then we kind of go into, at this point, we're into the blues, right?
Yeah. So I had come back from Austin. When I was there and the band broke up, I thought, why do all the guitar players need to live in Austin? Maybe there should be some in Indiana. So that was kind of why I came back. I wanted to establish maybe a blues scene here, help get one started here in Indiana. I mean, there was one, but and it was a ripe time for that. Stevie Ray Vaughan was very popular, although he died right after I got back, which was a shame.
Mm-hmm.
There in 1990. But it was just a good time to be playing blues music and kind of Texas blues. That's what I'd been down there, and very guitar oriented, kind of heavy stuff. And Chicago blues and West Coast, we did swing stuff. But with the young guys, the rhythm section I had, it was real exciting. We kind of took it over the top.
One of my favorite things to do with you in the past, Gordon, is I always loved walking into a music store with you, because you could say, I want to go try this guitar, and I'm going to play Stevie Ray Vaughan in this guitar. And then you would just break off some fantastic bit of Stevie Ray, and then you go, well, I'm going to go to this guitar and I want to play some blues on this one. So I just kind of have to pull the curtain back a little bit and let everybody know that it's worth the price of admission. If you can get Gordon to go into a guitar shop with you, it's always a little bit of heaven, because it's a bunch of different stuff going on there. And I'm going to put this mask on. I'm going to do this bit now. One of my favorite memories of going to a music store, because we used to do that on occasion, was going down to Kenny's Instruments in Ulitic, which was south of Bloomington. Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, we went down there, and I still remember, and I'm so glad you brought up the twin reverb as one of your first guitar amps, because we went to Kenny's in Ulitic, and the lady greeted us and said, "How yin's doing?" And I said, "We're fantastic." And I saw they had a twin reverb there. And I go, "Oh boy, I would love to have that." But, I was not making very much money back then. And I think it was like $350 or $300 for the twin reverb. It's like, oh, if I just had $300, I could have, I could have had I think it was a silver face or something that was just, worth an obscene amount of money now. But that's one of the great things I love to do, is just to go into music stores like that. And I just want everybody to know that's watching, is that's really a fun thing to do with Gordon, because when you have somebody that's talented like that, it's fun just to sit back and watch. So you guys are doing the Kings of Rhythm thing. You do that for 2 or 3 years. Is that how long that thing? Then you kind of move into another thing. So what happened to go from the Kings of Rhythm to the Cooler Kings?
To the Cooler Kings, yes. It was time to take it up another level. And it was Duke Tomatoes drummer, a guy named Rick Bowl. He'd been with Duke for years. He said, "Let's really try and make a top-notch blues band." So he and I said, "Well, then who are we going to get to play with us?" So we got this guy, Greg Lindholm, to play bass, played upright bass. We went on a big bass.
Mm-hmm.
And we needed a harmonica player, and Stuart Norton got the call, and he's a great singer. So although I'd spent the past 3 years learning how to be a front man and a lead singer, I knew that I wanted to get a great singer, and we would share the vocals, and I could concentrate on just playing guitar. And so we were kind of modeling it after that Texas blues band, similar to the Fabulous Thunderbirds,
mm-hmm.
where it's guitar, harmonica, bass, and drums. And there's just all this stuff you can do: Chicago blues, Texas blues. And so we set about writing a record. Before we didn't go out and just start gigging. We, from day one, started writing music. It took us about a year to record
mm-hmm.
all the songs at my parents' house up in Hammond with Dave Parker. And then we mixed it at Echo Park, Mike Wanchek's studio in Bloomington, and came out with the record, which was put out on the Slippery Noodle Sound label. And it was a great band. We went to Europe, it was just a really good band. But like all good things, it kind of fizzled out after about a year and a half.
Mm. So I know you were real good friends with Smokin' Dave, and did he play with you sometime around this era, somewhere in here?
He played with me. He was in my first incarnation after the Cooler Kings.
Okay. I knew it was somewhere in here. I couldn't remember exactly when it was.
Yes. And I don't know if you heard Smokin' David just passed away.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what brought him to mind. I wanted to make sure I asked you about him and what you thought of him, and when you played with him, what are your memories of him?
He was an amazing bass player, a funny guy, kind of grumpy. To look at him, you'd think he was always in a bad mood, but he had a great sense of humor. It was just kind of an odd read,
mm-hmm.
but he was an amazing bass player. I mean, toward the end there, Larry Crane would only play with Dave. He just loved the way Dave played.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Dave had been at his memorial service. I didn't realize all the bands that he had been in. He probably played with every band in Indianapolis. And he was just a great guy. Yeah, he's missed.
Yeah. I heard about that, and it came to my mind that as soon as I heard his name, I thought that he had played with you for a while, or on and off over the years.
We were off and on for about 10 years.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So
and we started as a trio, and then this young guy, Tom Harold, would come out, and another guy used to see us when he was in college, would come out and ask to play harmonica. And I kept inviting him up, and finally I just said, "You just need to be in the band." So then there we were again with a 4-piece Texas style band, harmonica, drums, bass, and me,
Mhm.
and Jeff Chapin on drums. He took Rick Ball's place in the Cooler Kings toward the end there, and so that was the Gordon Bonham Blues Band
From
which
96 or so on, right?
yeah, from '96 to the present. So it's gone through, you know, and I still get together with Tom when I do a bigger band, but I do trios now, and I've been playing with Chris Pyle for the last 4 or 5 years. So it's one of my favorite drummers in the whole world. Yeah.
Yeah, we had Chris on a few weeks ago. Fantastic guy. I was a big fan of his when he was with the Late Show, and
Right.
kind of was surprised when you said, "Oh yeah, Chris Pyle is going to play with me tonight," or whatever. It was like years and years ago. I don't remember when he started with you. I don't know how long ago that's been, but you mentioned his name. I go, "Is it that Chris Pyle?" And you go, "Yeah, that's that Chris Pyle." I said, "Well, that's fantastic." So how long have you guys been playing together?
About 4 or 5 years. You know, it's kind of hard to keep track with having lost the last two. So it might
Right,
even be 6.
right.
Yeah, that's us there at the Irvington Halloween Fest, which is one of our favorite gigs. It's sometimes it's chilly, but I think
Sometimes, a lot of times it is. Yeah.
but I
Yeah, you
mean
guys had a great gig there this last fall. It was a great show there at the what was it, the brewery, right?
at Black Brewing Company, yes.
Yeah, yeah. I came down and got some good video there, but when it comes to because this appears on YouTube, I can't really play. I'd love to play some of the songs you played. If I do that, then I get a copyright claim against me, and then no one gets to see the video. So I'd much rather not play the music and at least still be able to talk. So, but that was a great show. So, speaking of drummers, here's a recurring photo of one of our favorite drummers.
Oh yeah, there's Kenny at the drum clinic in Indianapolis just a few years ago, down at the drum center downtown. Yeah.
What a great guy. Do you have a favorite story about him? Anything that comes to mind over the years?
Probably one I shouldn't say
Okay, well,
on the
one that's
podcast.
anything you can share.
But Kenny was always a lot of fun, just full of energy and just a great guy. I mean, he really helped propel my career. You know, him being in the band got us a lot of notice and exposure, and it took us to that next level. I mean, here we were playing with one of the best drummers in the world. You can't, you know, if the drummer's good, the band's good.
Mhm.
So he really made a difference for us. I'm so grateful.
Yeah, Chris Pyle was mentioning him, like, when, we go see The Late Show or whatever, sometimes he would, The Late Show did kind of the same thing. On the third set, people were interchangeable, so people would go up, people would come down and do different numbers and stuff, and Chris would say that you could tell after Kenny had sit in at drums, because he'd come back and there'd be a dent in the head that would be about a half inch deep on a couple places. So he
Oh
could
yeah, you know
really.
what? At the Bluebird, they used to have the Jerry's Happy Hour.
Mhm. Yep.
Quite often, the Raging Texans would do the happy hour before, and the band that night was the Late Show. So we would use their gear. And there was one time in particular where Kenny just destroyed Chris's snare drum head,
Yeah.
and Chris was a little upset. And Kenny went out to his car and brought him like 4 drum heads and gave him all brand new ones.
And Chris is such a nice guy too. He never said, this sucks or anything like that. He would just say that drum head had seen better days after he got done with
I
it.
mean, it looked like, yeah, I mean, it had a divot in it about the size of a golf ball where Kenny was slamming it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, some great stories there with just the interaction of the different people in the bands, and it's very interesting from my point of view at this time of our lives that we can think back at what ended up being like such a memorable part of our life, spent in dark places late at night doing things that we're glad that no one had cell phones to take pictures of, how that goes. But
Oh God.
some great times. So you're doing the Gordon Bonham Blues Band, but while you're doing that, there's also this contraption called the Soul Bus. So talk to us about the Soul Bus. What was that and where was it?
Gosh, I forgot all about that. No, there. Remember, there used to be a band called the Alligator Brothers. It was
Yes, yeah.
Carl Story and Henry Lee and Bones, all those guys. And the bass player was a guy named Jeff Headback. Well, he kind of had this idea of a new version of that. So he went around and found 4 different band leaders and put us all in one band. So it was myself, Tad Robinson, who's an amazing blues soul singer, Just Richmond, who's an amazing folk rock kind of James Taylor-ish guy, and then another guy named Gordon Brooks, who's a saxophone player and had his own band in Anderson. And he just kind of threw this group of 4 guys together with the rhythm section and pitched it to the owner of Daddy Jack's and said, "Can we play every Monday? It's kind of an all-star band and what we're going to do is just whatever, like the Ragin Texans, we're just going to play a bunch of stuff that we would never play." So here's Tad Robinson, who's singing Beatles songs, and we're doing Neil Young songs and Crosby, Stills and Nash, and still not much blues and R&B. We were just kind of we kind of became this folky rock thing. But it was the band went on for 14 years every Monday night.
Amazing. So you kind of do like a lot of splinter type things. Like, I mean, I remember when you were like the brains behind Pa, where you would do some gigs like, in that iteration. Do you remember anything about the brains behind Pa?
That's a good friend of mine, Mr. Bill Price. We're working on a new CD right now. We've got 30 songs recorded. It's going to be a triple CD, I think. Yeah.
Nice.
We've been working on it for the last 2 years. But yeah, Bill lives here in Irvington, and he's a great songwriter. They just keep coming out, and he's done different projects with different bands. But the brains behind Pa is, we kind of started as doing a lot of Dylan covers and things like that. But now it's all original, and it's just great stuff. Our first CD was a little thing called Old Hat. It was almost like an EP, but it was all acoustic and just some really great, a couple old timey covers. But then we've kind of morphed more into this, I don't know, it's just real eclectic. Anything goes on some of these songs. Bill will inspire me to don't play anything like I play. So I'm just getting odd sounds out of my guitar and different settings, and it's cool. So yeah, that goes on even today.
Well, one thing since this is the Gordon show, one thing that has always amazed me about you, because I've sang a lot with you on stage and recorded a little bit and stuff, but what always amazes me is the way that you remember the words, because I can't remember the words worth a crap. I can remember the chords on the guitar, but I can never remember all the words. How do you remember all these words of all these different groups that you do covers of when you do like these offshoot bands?
And I wouldn't say I'm the best at memorizing stuff, but I just do them enough. I think it's more that I play so much that the stuff's always in the forefront of my mind. Because just the other day, someone called out a song that I haven't done since COVID started. So it's 2 years ago, and I was struggling to remember. But I think it's mostly because I play 5 nights a week, and I'm always practicing the words. So I think that's more of what it's about.
But that's an amazing thing, because that's when you have that many songs, it's not like a 30 song playlist or a set list that you're doing that night. You have, you may do 5 songs from that 30 song playlist next week with 2 different guys that have 30 different songs that you have to do.
Right.
It's amazing.
Yeah, I probably know over 100 songs. You just kind of have to find where they're hiding in there and get them. I did this one by Bob Dylan called "Things Have Changed." It took me a year. It's got 6 verses or 4 verses, and they're all really long. But it took me like a year to remember it. But it's kind of epic.
Yeah, and that's I think that's an amazing thing to do
Well,
that.
thank you.
And another thing that you do is you still do some stuff with Craig and the Crawdads.
Oh yes, Craig is one of the greatest boogie woogie barrel house piano players in the Midwest and the country actually.
Mhm.
And he does a boogie woogie piano festival every August in Bloomington. Of course, it was canceled the last 2 years, and we're hoping, our fingers crossed, we'll do it again this August. But he brings in great players from all over the Bob Seeley. I got to play with Marcia Ball, Clifton Chenier, or CJ Chenier, his son, and just great people. He brings them all to Bloomington, and I get to be in the house band, and we back up all these great piano players. And yeah, Craig's a great friend and one of the longest musicians I've played with. It's
Yeah.
great.
Great guy. And there's another thing that you did because you used to come to Chicago quite often. I would after I moved to Chicago, I would come see you at Blues or places like that. And that was with this guy. Some people may or may not recognize this guy. Who are you playing with here?
Oh, that's Yank
Like,
Rachell.
yep.
He's, and I hate to say I didn't realize how famous and heavy he was till after he'd passed away. He was, I mean, one of the inventors of blues. I mean, he was around in the 30s. Everybody talks about Robert Johnson. I've heard recordings of Yank from the same period, and he sounds just the same.
Hmm.
Playing guitar, but this is before he got on the mandolin. And he was just amazing. He's totally world famous player. He lived here in Indianapolis. And he's mostly known for, he wrote that song. Everybody's heard Taj Mahal's version of She Caught the Katy.
Mm-hmm.
It's the opening credits of the Blues Brothers movie. But actually, Yank wrote the song, and Taj kind of rearranged it and changed some lyrics. But that was Yank's tune from back in the 1940s, I think.
And Yank would play in Chicago, right?
Oh yeah,
I remember you playing with him at would have been at Blues, Blues on Halstead, maybe, or would it have been at Buddy Guy's? Because I remember seeing you at Buddy Guy's too.
I think I played at Blues on Halstead with Yank and at Rosa's one time.
Okay.
But Buddy Guys, I played mostly there with my own group. I think I played there with Gary Primich once, but then I had the Gordon Bonham Blues Band several times at Legends. Yeah.
That's great. So what about Jimmy Walker too? You played with Jimmy Walker too, right?
Yes, this is a funny story. Jimmy was a friend of Yank's. So Jimmy got my phone number from Yank. But I just got back from Texas and the phone rang and it was Jimmy Walker. And he said, "Gordon, would you do a gig with me in Chicago?" And I said, "I'd love to. Gosh." He said, "Would you just play with me like you did in Atlanta?" And I said, "Jimmy, I never played with you in Atlanta." And he says, "Yes, you did." And I said, "Okay, I did." And I ended up working with him for 10 or 12 years on probably mistaken identity.
Hey, stolen valor or whatever it takes, right? Play with
But
somebody.
he liked the way I played, and I was his guy till he passed away. Yeah, it was a real honor to play with him. I mean, he would tell me stories. He retired in 1946. I mean, that's how he was in his 90s when I was playing with him.
Wow.
It was really great stories, and just he was around for all of the Chicago blues, Muddy Waters, all that stuff.
It's amazing how you get your 6 degrees of Robert Johnson, kind of like these guys that were kind of in his era. Just to be playing with them, it's got to be mind blowing sometimes.
Oh yeah, I mean, and when he would play, we always played at Blues on Halstead. I mean, I was the youngest guy in the band by 30 years. These guys were all in their 70s and 80s. And everybody would come out to see him just to honor him because he was one of the elder statesmen.
Mm-hmm.
So I got to meet all these great people who would just come down, sit in the front row just to watch Jimmy visit. And it was pretty special.
It's one of those, sometimes you just have to kind of like pinch yourself and go, I just can't really believe that I'm up here right now, but this is really cool and I'm going to enjoy it.
Yeah, I mean, I got to play the Petrillo Bandshell Chicago Blues Fest, in front of 30,000 people with Jimmy, and it was pretty exciting.
You did some work with Bo Diddley too, right?
Yes, that's a good story. I dropped in the Vogue just to visit with the owners. I think it was Dennis Burris was there, and I said, I see you're going to have Bo Diddley. Who's going to be in the band? And he said, what do you mean who's going to be in the band? We're hiring, it's Bo Diddley. And I said, he doesn't have a band. He just shows up with his square guitar, gets off the plane, takes a cab to the club, and you got to have a band for him. And they didn't know that. And I said, oh gosh, we'll put together a band.
Kind of like
So
Chuck Berry.
I was kind of, yeah, like Chuck Berry.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just kind of in the right place at the right time and knew what was going on. And so that was where I hired Toby Myers, Rick Ball on drums. I think I had, and I had Craig Brenner on keyboards, and we just had a really great show with Bo.
So when that comes up, do you just go, okay, guys, here are the songs we need to make sure we know how to play, or do you put on records or tapes? I'm showing how old I am now, but like Bo Diddley songs, you go, okay, let's try to learn these, or you just go up there and wing it?
Yes. I listened to a bunch. I have every single Bo Diddley record. I listened to a bunch of them, but then kind of realized there's not even drums and bass on Bo Diddley records. So what are you going to tell the drummer to do?
Right.
Those early records had maracas. That, it was like this guy, Jerome, played maracas. There was no drums. So the Bo Diddley beat is more of what people hear Buddy Holly doing on Not Fade Away.
Mm-hmm.
That dump, ba-dump, 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 dump. But Bo didn't really have that beat. He played that on his guitar, but the drums did something different. So a lot of times the Bo Diddley beat on drums is just a straight beat, but Bo kind of wanted it to be like Buddy Holly. So that's what we did. So yeah, and really we would just wing it. There was no rehearsal, just a sound check. We, you get up on stage, he just starts playing, doesn't tell you a key, doesn't say anything, doesn't say what the song is. He just started scratching on his guitar. And the first thing I was kind of just staying out of his way, being quiet. And he stopped the band. He said, don't try and do what I do. I said, okay. He said, just play solos the whole time. I'm like, guitar player heaven. So I just played lead guitar and riffs and filled around him. And it was great. That was when he was doing those Bo Knows commercials with Bo Jackson. So he was kind of hot for a while, just as a pop star.
Any other stories like that? I mean, you talked about you opened for Jerry Lee, Bo and those. Any other groups like that you remember opening up for?
I opened for BB King a few times, which was really exciting. Stood in line like a fan and got his autograph on the back of my guitar, which is pretty neat. He was great. One night I was standing I was out in the audience. And after he did a couple songs, he said, ladies and gentlemen, how about a big hand for Brother Gordon? I thought, I can't believe it. Bo Diddley just said my name. I mean, BB King said my name. And so the next night I went and stood in the wings because I wanted to see if he did it again. And I couldn't believe that he remembered my name, but then I saw him reach into the pocket of his tuxedo and pull out a little white card, and he read it off there. Let's hear it for Brother Gordon. But it was pretty neat that he was so gracious to even mention the warm-up act. So that was cool. And I played with John Grimm, a little tour. He's the guy who wrote that song Ice Cream Man, that Van Halen did that crazy version of. And who else did I just played with? A lot of different, Cash McCall. He did the song and I played with I don't know. I'm blanking now.
That's all right. When you run into these guys, do they ever have a pearl of wisdom? Anything that, do you recall anything that somebody said to you that was really like, wow, that's a great thing to remember? Any words of wisdom? Anybody share any tips, like, whenever you play this chord, always do it this way, or any nuggets like that you might have gotten on stage from somebody?
No, I mean, but there was one thing that Yank said, and it almost sounds made up because it was such a gracious thing. But there's this blues guys, there's this tradition of trying to cut each other. Who's the best? Who's the fastest? Who's this or that? And Yank one time said to me, he said, "You're the best guitar player in the whole world who sounds like you." I thought, from an old guy, that was just pretty cool.
Yeah.
He was saying, you just need to be who you want to be. And it doesn't matter who's faster, who's this or that, or plays more notes. And so I was just kind of remembered that as to just try and have my own sound and be me, you know?
Yeah. So uh, obviously played in front of some pretty big crowds. You talked about Patrol Bandshell with at the Blues Fest. Also, if someone wanted to go out now, back in the old days, we would say, when people go to the record store, where do they find your records, or where can they buy your stuff? Are you on SoundCloud? Are you on Reverb Nation? Are you CDs? Can people get your stuff at your shows? How can people get some Gordon Bonham recordings, like what it was be the Cooler Kings and um, other stuff?
I think there are some tabs on my website, gordonbonham.com, where they can hook you up with. I sell through the company called CD Baby.
Mm-hmm.
Although lately, I think they're just doing streaming now.
Okay.
So really, if somebody really wanted to get a hold of my CDs, send me an email. I'll send you one.
So what are some of the names of the CDs that you've done off the top of your head? Do you remember?
Well, the first one is the Cooler Kings, Looks Like Trouble. And then my solo acoustic one came out called Get Back Home. That came out in 97. And then Gordon Bonham Blues Band, Low Down in Blue, came out a few months later. And then I also have my next one around 2012 or 13 was called Soon in the Morning. That's kind of just Gordon Bonham, not necessarily the blues band. It's just my record.
Mm-hmm.
Then the last one I did, a live radio broadcast on WFHB, the community radio in Bloomington. And Rich Merpergo in the Bloomington recorded us, and we made a live CD out of the radio broadcast. So that one's available too. So I'm not using any kind of distribution or selling sites, but I'm certainly easy to find if somebody wanted something.
The CD Baby is probably a pretty good place to look then. CD Baby would be a good place to start. Now
you can hear me on Spotify. I have a few songs on Spotify too.
Oh, okay, cool. We'll definitely check that out. And walking into a recording studio the first time is always something that's like very amazing to walk into these places. And usually sometimes they're like really fancy, and sometimes you see these great big, I'm talking back when we were young, you'd see these great big platters of tape where they'd have 1 inch or 2 inch tape, and they'd have these big multi-track machines. You mentioned an interesting time, one of your first times in a recording studio maybe had some interaction with a group like Earth, Wind and Fire or something. How did that work out?
Oh yeah, it was my very first time in a studio. It was up in Whiting, Indiana, right near Lake Michigan. And we were in there just talking about our project that we were going to do, a little 2-song demo. This is probably 1978. And Earth, Wind and Fire was in the other room, not the whole band, but I mean, several guys. And I couldn't believe it, because they were from Gary. So they were right there doing, they had some project going on. Maybe it was a side thing, but there they were.
That's
I think
cool.
Another time I was at a music store and the guys from Styx were in there. The DJ's Music up in Chicago. That was kind of cool.
Yeah. So talking about music stores, we're just about ready to wrap up here. So I know you've got other stuff to do, and thank you so much for joining us tonight. But no conversation you and I have never always includes talk about gear. So we want to talk about a guitar. We want to talk about amps or something like that real quick for the gearheads. But what's your favorite amp to play? Now, if you had to play, let's say you had to play the back room at the Slippery Noodle, what amp would you take to play there?
Super Reverb. I've got a 1966 Blackface Super Reverb.
And you had a Music Man that you were playing a little bit there too for a while. Do you still have that Music Man?
No. I do have a 1973 Deluxe Reverb, which is pretty deluxe. It's a little bit smaller, easier to get around, but the Super is kind of the holy grail.
And how many watts is that version? I don't remember off the top of my head. You happen to recall?
35 or so.
Perfect, right? With a microphone.
Just the other side of 40 watts. Yeah.
Now I know you. I think I've seen you lately playing maybe a Les Paul here and there, but wouldn't you say your favorite is maybe a Strat? What is your favorite guitar to play? If you had to take one guitar to play, what would it be?
It would be a Strat. I'm a Strat guy. I have 3 of them. I love my Telecaster, and I've got a Gibson ES330, which is pretty cool. But I'm a Strat guy. Kind of has my voice.
Yeah, and any special, like, do you have humbuckers in it, or anything tapped or anything, or is it just straight old Texas specials, or just
stock from the factory?
Nice.
I like when people say, "What pickups are those?" I like to say the ones that came with it.
Nice. Nice. So what's the oldest Strat that you have currently?
I have a 63 3-tone Sunburst Stratocaster. Incidentally, the date stamped on the neck is October 3rd, which is Stevie Ray Vaughan's birthday.
Wow.
October 3rd, 1963. He was born in 55, but his birthday was in October, which is kind of weird.
And you've had that guitar for a while. Is that one that you've had for the long haul?
About 40 years, yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
I bought it back when nobody even wanted them. You know, people wanted Floyd Roses and fancy spiky guitars.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So I got it for nothing.
So, well, that's, now my interview is complete, because now we've talked about all the bands you're in, the gear that you like to play. It looks like a Martin maybe sitting there in the background too. So yeah, there you go. So it's always good to see that. And I just want to thank you, Gordon, so much for, first of all, your friendship over all these years. I want to thank you for putting up with my antics at various stages throughout our friendship, putting up with me sometimes. But I just wanted to make sure that I got you on here, and I want to thank you for joining the show. I know a lot of people are excited to see this show, and this will be living on in reruns as we go through. So hopefully we talked a little bit about what it was like to be Gordon Bonham through the years, and the music that you've played. And I know that you're always so accommodating to people when they come up at shows and say hi. And I just want you to know that as fans, we really, really thank you for being so nice to us when we come up and bother you, because I know what it's like to be packing up your amp and, trying to get home, and, there's 4 inches of snow on the ground. And, but we really thank you for joining the show tonight. And I know a lot of people are looking forward to it. So I'm going to wrap it up right here, folks. So I'd like to thank Gordon. Good to see you. We'll be in touch.
Thanks, Sly. Thanks for having me. It's been a lot of fun. Yeah.
We appreciate the time. And that does it for this broadcast of the Indiana Rock Machine. I'm Sly Rose. I am your host. I want to thank you for joining us. And we are on Facebook, and we are also on YouTube. So make sure you hit the subscribe button and the like button if you're watching us on YouTube. And we appreciate you taking the time. Until the next one, we will see you next time.